Hello.
Hi. Thanks for sticking around.
What an intense experience
I guess so.
right there. Yeah. Okay, I was thinking when I was watching it, I kept wondering what your entry point into this film was, what the seed was, as it were.
Oh, clever. Yeah, let's see. Sean and I were in Russia in 2010, I want to say, making a film about folklore in Eastern Europe. And we were in St. Petersburg, and we were walking around, and I saw this building, and we were talking to the translator about it, and he was saying that it was the world's first seed bank. And having studied botany and ethnobiology, I was really interested in that, so I started doing more research. And the more research I did, the more the seed of the project took root, and I couldn't escape it. So Sean and I obviously talked about that project for a long time before we actually made it. We made it in 2017, or we shot it in 2017. So it was a long time coming, and it was a ton of research. I spent years just reading everything I could get my hands on in English about the siege, all the journals and the diaries and all the textbooks, you name it, I devoured it. But it was dark, dark times.
And you project the film sort of into the future rather than actually looking directly at the siege. For you, is that a way of being free of some of the historical specificities and using it more as like a metaphor, a way of understanding larger ideas?
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. I mean, for me also, it was sort of taking it out of that weird otherworldly sense of nostalgia that I think that all historical films have, whether or not they're devastating. It still feels like some alternate reality, some alternative history. While I was writing the film, I spent a lot of time, I was working in a post office, and all the people around me were 18 and 19-year-old kids. And to them, World War II was literally ancient history, like equivalent to mummies. And it just felt, I wasn't interested in making a film that felt too old to be relevant. So I wanted something that would bring the story into a contemporary context that would just, allow it to be more accessible.
Yeah. The music, too, I felt like did that, especially toward the beginning. It felt like it established it in a very different space than World War II.
Thank you. Yes.
The sound in general, I felt the war is largely a sonic event in the film. So it seemed to me like as much of a visual experience for a lot of it as it was a sonic experience.
Yeah, sound has always been really important to me. All of my films, I edit silent first and then go back and add sound.
Wow.
And in the past, we've shot on film, which makes it, in some ways, a lot easier because the sound is separate anyway. But yeah, it's weird that you guys have this cricket noise the entire time you were watching this film, because there are no crickets. But it's very strong cricket noise in here. But the sound was really important to me because, for one thing, it was very present in all the journals and diaries. Everyone talked about how quiet the city became as it started to die. But I had lived in the Arctic before, up way north in Lapland, and the silence there was like nothing I had ever experienced. It was like deadening quiet, where it felt like there was something pressing on your eardrums. And it was so deeply unsettling. And then while I was editing the film, I was living in South Korea on a military base, and it was, the American military is there basically just to show North Korea that we exist, that we're nearby. And so they just run these exercises all the time. There's tons of sound coming out of the loudspeakers on base that you can hear all across the city. In the morning they play Reverie, and then at noon there are alarm systems, and then at 5 they have both the national anthems, and then at 10 they have taps, and it's like you just hear noises from base all the time, and then you have on top of that, the war sounds, the planes like U-2s and F-16s and Black Hawk helicopters, so close that the windows in the apartment would shake. And that sound that you feel before you hear was such a big part of living there, and it really felt like psychological torture. Like, obviously we knew we weren't at war,
Right.
but there was no, you just couldn't escape it. It was just a terrifying feeling. So when we mixed the sound, I just kept being like, no, we need more bass, it needs to be louder, 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 louder. Because just to get that same sensation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can't really get it here anyway, because no theater wants to turn up their sound that loud.
Right.
But yeah, that was really important. And then the last thing I would say about the sound, besides this cricket noise, which is just it's really aggressive here, is that ticking that you hear throughout the film. That is something that I read about both in the journals and diaries, but also in the textbooks, was during the war they had loudspeakers set up all around Leningrad, and they would, at the beginning, they would sort of make announcements, propaganda announcements, like, oh, join the fire brigade, whatever. But also like, oh, we just had this battle, we won, the Germans were crushed, all these things, so there was a lot of noise that would happen through the loudspeakers, news. And then as the war wore on, there was less and less news because it was sort of a stalemate until somebody just gave up. And so they stopped having things to say on the radio, and then people started dying so much, and it became that there was nobody there to speak. And so if there was one person at the entire radio station, they would put on a metronome in front of the microphone, just to let St. Petersburg know that there was one person left.
Wow.
And it became this sort of heartbeat of the city that people would wake up and listen for, and be like, are we still alive? Is there still somebody out there? So we found an actual recording of the metronome, and were able to use that in the film. So that feels like a really important part of it to me.
Yeah, in the beginning it has more of a rhythmic quality, and then it becomes more...
It changes, they would change it, if they knew that there was a raid coming or something, it would speed up.
Oh, I see.
But yeah.
I didn't know that, and so I interpreted it as the clock that's mentioned. There's a house
that's blown apart.
That's blown apart, and all that's left is this clock that's still ticking. And it had been there before, but that's just how I kept returning to it, because that image was so. But that was out of a journal, or was
yeah. So a lot of the dialogue was pulled directly from journals and diaries of the.
So it's like a big collage. Really.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big collage. That's something. If you know my work, that's very typical of me.
Yeah. I was gonna say, even at the end, how you resolve it almost like a documentary in some ways, and that felt like tonally related to a lot of other films you've made.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Yeah. And also, okay, so you also have this museum project you do, and it's all about collecting small things.
Yeah.
And this film is all about collecting small things on some level.
It is.
And about the life or death nature of that collection.
Yeah, so if anybody cares to know, I have a small museum in Las Vegas called the Office of Collecting and Design, which is a museum of lost and forgotten objects, miniatures, obsolete things. And yeah, watching the film now, I mean, I opened it, after I had completed the film, but watching it now, I look back at a lot of the set design in this film, and I'm like, oh yeah, I see how my museum reflects this sort of, the way that things open, the boxes and the drawers and all the little bits of things. So yeah, I can see how they're related.
But even like the psychology of collecting something being such a, essential to society, really.
Yeah.
This or culture living on, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, archives are sort of a major fascination of mine in all forms, whether that's a museum or a library or an actual archive. The idea that we project ourselves into the future, whether by choice or just by what gets left behind, is something that's really fascinating to me.
Right. Even the film itself, you're kind of curating these recollections into kind of new collection
Yeah.
of memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to think about it. I like this.
You know, and of course, the other thing that is so different since you originally made it is Russia's war on Ukraine, which must feel like it brings a very different light on this film now, right?
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I stand with Ukraine, but also my Russian friends are stuck in Russia, and
Yeah.
you know, none of them would ever compare what they have right now to the siege. But they can't work, and the grocery stores are empty, and you know, none of the shops, like society isn't functioning there now. So in some ways, it feels sort of similar. They are trapped in this weird siege of their own making. I mean, not their making, but siege of Putin's making, I guess. So yeah, it is a strange counterbalance to what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how that can happen with art. You can't predict the future.
Yeah,
So,
you don't say.
yeah, you can make whatever you want, and then depending on how the future goes, so does the art often.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Mostly just the museum. Mostly
Yeah.
I just work at the museum now. I'm sure I'll get back to filmmaking, but COVID was hard on all filmmakers, I think, and I make films about other cultures, and I'm really excited that there's so much space for cultures to make their own films now, and it feels like maybe now's not the right time for me as a filmmaker. So so I've got other projects that I'm really excited about, and I'm happy to be working on them. If anybody ever comes to Vegas, it's a short 4-hour drive from here, and it's there's not a lot in Vegas, but there are some good things. One of which is my museum. If anybody wants to join, it's great. Does anybody out there have any questions? Yeah, this person over here has a very enthusiastic question.
Was there any thought to show or explain who wrote the narration, like in introducing that at the beginning of the film versus the end of the film?
Yeah, I find that most people don't actually remember anything that happens at the beginning of the film. Do you remember any of the titles that happened at the beginning of the film? Yeah, that was why I put it at the end. I've had that question before about why I put that title at the end that says this was taken from Journals and Diaries, and I remember it was like one of the only lessons I learned in film school was that basically titles at the beginning mean nothing. Nobody will remember them at the end of the film. But I do say, like, that this is all based on journals and diaries at the beginning of the film. I just don't say it's all, it's not pure excerpts. So, yeah, it's there. It's there. It's just most people don't remember. Anybody else? You call.
Right here?
The titular line of the film, did that come from a journal?
Yeah, she says, so that's a poem by Olga Berglotz that she says in the film, it matters not at all that, it matters not that a million men die, it matters only that one man dies a million times. Yeah, that was actually something I had sort of pulled aside as a possible title, and then talking with the cast and crew about it, it's a very strange way that she says it in Russian. It's sort of backwards. She says, it doesn't, nobody would say it that way, the way that she constructed it as a poem. And the cast and crew that I was talking to about it just really, I loved what it said about the film, but they also really loved the way it sounded and what it meant about the film in its context. So we chose that. And then, of course, there's that very famous Stalin quote about, a million men die, it's a statistic, and one man dies, it's a tragedy. Or the other way around. So it felt apropos.
There's a question here.
I wanted to ask about working in Russia, in the Russian language. Do you speak Russian?
I do not speak Russian.
How was that process?
It was fantastic. I love working in foreign languages. It's my favorite thing to sit at a table with a bunch of people that aren't speaking English and just watch. I love that feeling so much, and I really miss it because I haven't traveled in a very long time. But Yeah, it was, all of my films take place in other countries where I don't speak the language, because I can hardly speak English. But this was my first time working with actors, and in a way it was such a relief because I never had to worry about their performance. I just had to believe them. And it was such an intuitive process. I could like shortcut all of the sort of surface material that goes along with acting, and I could just be like, did I believe that performance? No. Let's try it for the 400th time. But I also love the privacy that it allows people when they know that I can't speak their language. Especially working in documentary, I feel like that's especially important. But also here with the cast and crew, they had, I don't know, they had their own way of communicating, obviously, that didn't involve me, and it was like watching a well-oiled machine. It was just a magic cast and crew. They were, with very few exceptions, they worked together so wonderfully, and really made this dream come true, even though we couldn't communicate. We all could, somehow. I remember at one point, the DP, Sean, it was late in the shoot, and we were out drinking, and he and the set designer, who literally had no words of English. I mean, a lot of them we could sort of communicate little bits here and there, but the set designer had nothing. And he and Sean were like in deep conversation for like 45 minutes, like really having this conversation. To this day, nobody knows what they talked about because they have no words in common. But I really feel like there was so much more to there was just a lot. I don't know. I feel like you just connect somehow on a more intuitive level if you can't speak the same language. And I think so much of this film was intuition. So a lot of it also, I did want to say, we kept as much as we could documentary. So obviously the narration, but also the events that happened are all timed and were all things that were recorded in history. The sets we tried to keep as undressed as, not all the sets, some of the dress sets were very well dressed, but actually in the seed bank we tried to do as little as possible. And all the extras in the seed bank were actual workers in the seed bank that still work there to this day and just volunteered to be part of our film for a day or two. And then a lot of the people in the bread lines were actual survivors of the siege, which I thought was really amazing to be able to incorporate that. But everybody in the film had a story about someone that had survived the siege or not survived the siege. So it was a very personal story, I think, for everyone involved. And so I think that really helped because everyone wanted to do the best that they could for it.
You kind of been hinting at it, but earlier, before I saw the film, you said how great of a time you had filming it, that you were just like, it was a blast. And so as I was watching the film, I was like having this parallel narrative of you just like... I recently rewatched the film for the first time when it premiered in New York, and I laughed the whole time, which is terrible. It's not the reaction to have, but I have such sweet memories of that time. It was, the research and the editing of the film were so hard and so dark, but the actual shooting was just wonderful. We just had an amazing time. St. Petersburg is a magic city, and it was just great. It's just great. I can't say more than that. It's just really fun. Did it come out of any personal darkness, like wanting to make the film, or not necessarily?
God, I really didn't want to make this film. It's funny, I would never watch this film if it wasn't me that had made it. I would definitely avoid this film. I only watch kids' movies, basically.
Like what? What's your favorite?
I love Moana. I love WALL-E.
All right.
Yeah. I really love kids' movies. That strong moral fiber. I love it. Happy endings. They're great. But, Monster House.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's
Gail
really
Kinnan.
good. Yeah.
I love that one. Okay, anyway.
I've got applause for Monster House.
But wait, I'm sorry, I totally got lost in the question.
You were saying you had a great time filming it.
Yeah, but there was a second question.
There was a second question. But you said it's strong moral fiber, and that's the thing I took away from this whole movie. It's just like how these people, you know, the pure willpower, they're just using like this idea
And it's an idea. I mean, we know that cigarettes kill us and we still smoke. But somehow these people were able to see so far ahead of their own lifetimes and think, yeah, okay, this is worth doing for people I will never know, well into the future. I don't know, I think that's really remarkable.
And it was the same institute as?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it still exists, still there, always struggling, as you can see, very underfunded, but it's an amazing place and still full of people that really believe in what they're doing. So, yeah, a lot of hope in this film. It's like just a really hopeful romp.
And yet the last moment, it really, you know.
Yeah, it turns it around.
It's like WALL-E for like 2 seconds at the last, you know.
The very end, yeah.
I guess WALL-E's pretty heavy.
It's dark. There are some dark moments in WALL-E.
WALL-E's heavy.
Anyway, on that note, does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
Well, going into the film, did you know it was gonna be black and white?
Yes, yeah, we knew it was gonna, I mean, I knew it was gonna be black and white. I had this moment, I mean, Sean and I had been talking about this film for a long time, and it had many different iterations, but I had this moment when I was driving across Wyoming where I actually saw the entire film from start to finish. And,
Yeah.
It's fine, okay. I saw the film from start to finish, and it was in black and white, and so I called Sean and I was like, okay, I have the film, I'm ready, it's gonna be in black and white. He was great. And so we actually shot the whole thing in camera, in black and white, with the exception of the 3 color scenes. So there was no going back, which the producers were mixed about, but yeah, we knew. Yeah. We didn't run into any issues. In fact, we were incredibly lucky. Most Russian productions are not allowed to shut down the subway, but we did. And I mean, you have to get government permission because it's obviously a government institution, and yeah. But somehow we were able to do it. Everyone on the cast and the crew were like, "Holy shit, we're shooting in the subway! This is amazing!" Yeah, and we shut it down for a night and got to film those scenes in there, which was really amazing. Yeah, no, everyone was very supportive. The Institute was very supportive. We had 0 problems, knock on wood. It still hasn't showed there publicly, but that's more due to COVID than anything else.
There's a very long staircase, you know?
Yeah.
That's how they are there?
Yeah. It's like a commute within a commute.
Yeah.
You get on the escalator to go down to the subway, and they're like, you're on the escalator for like 5 or 6 minutes. You're just going and going and going. People are like watching movies, doing their makeup. I don't know, it's a very strange experience to be on an escalator for that long. You can't see the bottom when you get on. It just it just goes on. It's pretty cool though. Beautiful, beautiful place. Anyway, thank you guys.
Oh, we have one more question.
I think you talked about this in articles and stuff, but since you mentioned screening it publicly in Russia, can you talk about why you don't want the film won't be available, streaming or on video?
Yeah, there are a couple reasons for that. One is the sound design. I really don't think, maybe if you have a lovely 5.1 mix at home, 5.1 stereo system, it works for you. But most people are just watching it on a laptop, and we don't have a stereo version. We only have a 5.1 version. So you really can't get the sound. And the second part of it is that, 3 parts. The second part of it is that I really feel like these people deserve attention, the type of attention that you can't give a laptop. There's like a sort of lack of sensitivity on a laptop, and I really think that this, the movie is slow for a minute, you look at your cell phone, you get up to get a glass of water, you take a piss, whatever, you don't have the sort of immersive experience that I think the truth of this film really deserves. And then on top of that, I make films about atmosphere. I don't really make films about character or about narrative. I don't really care about plot. I really care about atmosphere and mood, and I really don't think that that comes through on a laptop. And I've struggled in the past. You know, I just released my third film online for the first time, and it's I've had very mixed feelings about it. But this one, that one didn't have the weight that this one does, so it feels a little bit better to just let it go. But this one just feels, I don't know, somehow disrespectful to the story to let it be that way. Yeah.
Have you ever had an intense cinematic experience on a laptop? Or you don't think?
I don't think so.
No?
No. Have you?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Not the same.
Not the same. I've had intense experiences, cinematic experiences at home, but never like in a theater.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be like watching John Dielman at home. I don't know if anybody knows that movie, the Chantal Ackerman movie, where basically it's just, yeah, the whole movie is in details, and if you miss the first time the details start to go off, yeah, then basically the movie is totally doesn't make sense. So I think that's something you have to watch in a theater too. I mean, there are many movies like that. I don't know, maybe I'm being pretentious, probably, but I still feel that way.
There's something about experiencing this movie with other people too that feels really appropriate.
I mean, I think I talk about this. It's very warm in here. I'm gonna let you guys go. I swear. I won't talk about this film all evening. But I was gonna say that so many of the moments in the film feel really potent to me because to me, the film is much more about Maxime than it is about Elisa. But that's just me. But there's so many moments in the film to me where he's surrounded by other people and still totally alone. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's such a, I don't know, I've had that feeling in so many places that I've lived. And I really wanted that to be a part of this film also. And I think being in a theater is part of that.
Yeah.
Being totally alone and having this totally private experience while you're surrounded by hordes of people like this totally packed theater. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Thank you guys all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Ross, for asking wonderful questions.